To the world, he was a ghost in plain sight. Julian Wells, a man of sharp angles and quiet observation. Someone you'd dismiss as just another skinny guy, lost in the scribbles of a leather-bound notebook. They saw him as harmless, forgettable. What they couldn't see was the intricate web of law he was weaving in his mind, the silent count of every transgression, every abuse of power. They couldn't know that his pen was mightier than their batons, and he was preparing to strike with the very rules they believed they were above. The Atlanta sky had blood into a bruised charcoal as Julian stepped out of the federal courthouse. Rain slicked the pavement, turning the street into a canvas of pulsing reds and greens from the traffic lights. A chill clung to the night air, and his blazer felt thin against the cold. 14 hours in a closed-door conference room had left him wary, the weight of sworn testimonies, distorted footage, and silenced voices settling deep in his lungs. He clutched a slim leather folder to his chest. It wasn't just paper inside, it was a ledger of lives derailed, unlawful force, false arrests, cases meticulously sanitized by internal review boards. These were not files, they were souls waiting for justice. As he turned the corner, a commotion flared under the sterile glare of patrol car lights. 2 officers loomed over a young man, handcuffed and kneeling on the wet ground. His face was a map of fresh bruises, his lips split. There was no weapon, no sign of a threat, just brown skin and eyes pleading for a mercy that wasn't coming. Instinct took over. Julian lifted his phone, the lens a silent, impartial witness. Evidence, documentation. Then came the shove. A hand clamped around his wrist like a vise, another spinning him around with brutal force. "Back off, citizen," a voice barked, thick with impatience. Before Julian could process it, his shoulder slammed against the hood of a cruiser. The folder slipped from his grasp, its contents scattering across the wet concrete like fallen doves. Captain Derek Sullivan didn't ask questions. He never did. 2 decades on the force had bleached the world into stark black and white, and Julian, with his soft voice and slender frame, was a smudge of gray that didn't belong in Sullivan's rigid world. Interfering with police business, sweetheart, the captain sneered, the word dripping with venom as he pressed a heavy knee into Julian's back. Or just looking for a little attention. Julian didn't scream. He didn't fight back. He simply stared at the warped reflection of flashing lights on the chrome bumper, his heart pounding. Not with fear, but with a cold, methodical fury. This wasn't just abuse. This was a gift. This was evidence, raw and irrefutable. And this time, the law would not blink. Across the lot, a junior officer, Riley, hesitated. His body cam was off, an unspoken order from the command. But his fingers hovered over the switch, a silent war raging within him. Sullivan didn't notice. He was too busy yanking Julian upright by his collar, shoving him toward the back of a patrol SUV. "Let's see how tough you are in a holding cell." Still no recognition. Still no clue he was manhandling a man appointed by the U.S. Department of Justice, a senior federal advisor with nationwide jurisdiction over police conduct violations. He didn't know that every insult, every illegal restraint was being recorded in real time by a high-definition camera hidden inside the silver pen clipped to Julian's jacket. And then Julian finally spoke, his voice unnervingly even. "You're violating federal statute 18 U.S. Code section 242. Sullivan paused, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, unsettled by the sheer calm. "You are Captain Derek Sullivan, badge number 472. Julian continued, his tone clinical. "Your supervisor is Lieutenant Grace Powell, and this is your 3rd use of force report this quarter. I suggest you let me go, but men like Sullivan never let go, not until it's far too late." As the SUV door slammed shut, Officer Riley glanced one last time at the calm man in the back, then quietly, decisively, tapped his body cam on. That night, Sullivan believed he had silenced another bystander. He had no idea the man he'd tried to break was the one who wrote the laws that could silence him forever. Long before he could dismantle systems of power, Julian Wells learned what it was to be powerless. At 15, His trembling hands folded his last pair of jeans into a trash bag. He'd come out to his adoptive family a week prior. It took them 3 days to process and less than 3 minutes to cast him out. His foster father, a decorated veteran, had uttered a single sentence before slamming the door. "This house doesn't raise weakness." The words were a brand. He slept at bus stops, weathered winters in shelters, and buried the boy who once believed family meant protection. But in those cold, quiet nights, he discovered a new faith. Justice didn't have to be brutal. It could be a scalpel, precise and unerring. If the system punished people for merely existing, he would rebuild that system from the inside out. As a boy, he'd collected newspaper clippings of local heroes. One of them had been a young Derek Sullivan. Julian had once idolized the man with the strong jaw and flawless arrest record. Now, he was no longer the boy who idolized. He was the man who investigated. His presence at the courthouse wasn't an accident. He was the tip of the spear for the Civil Rights Division, deployed to investigate a pattern of misconduct spreading like a cancer through the department. All roads led to Sullivan's command structure, to a culture of silence and impunity. His mission was to observe, but the moment Sullivan laid hands on him, the mission changed from observation to activation. Inside the patrol car, Julian's mind was a whirlwind of analysis. By protocol, Sullivan should have reported the arrest. He hadn't. His body cam should have been active. It wasn't. The slur, "sweetheart," wasn't just an insult. It was a violation of dignity under color of law. At the precinct, Sullivan began fabricating his report while Julian remained a portrait of calm. He requested his one phone call. The number he dialed wasn't for a lawyer. It was a secure DOJ line that triggered 2 internal alerts and activated a flag Julian himself had authored, a clause buried in a pilot program to monitor repeat use of force offenders. It was called Section 1822. He had written it for this exact moment. Meanwhile, Officer Riley found a quiet corner in the locker room. His hands shook. He knew activating his camera could cost him his career, but the memory of Julian's unflinching gaze wouldn't let him back down. When Julian was quietly released under federal immunity protocols, Sullivan shrugged it off as a favor from some liberal attorney. But as Julian turned to leave, he stopped and calmly recited Sullivan's full name, badge number, commanding officer, and the precise statute he had violated. That was when a rookie at the desk dropped his coffee cup. The name Julian Wells wasn't just a name. It was a warning. Justice doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears glasses, walks softly, and remembers everything. And the men who mistake quiet for weakness are the first to be forgotten by the history they tried to break. 23 minutes after Julian's call, the gears of the Justice Department began to turn. Behind reinforced doors, a team prepared for a Type 0 breach, when an undercover federal operative is compromised. The pen in Julian's pocket wasn't just recording. It was live streaming to secure DOJ servers. Every word, every shove was already logged before Sullivan even finished his falsified report. 2 black SUVs rolled into the precinct parking lot without sirens. 3 plain-clothed agents walked in and asked, not demanded, to see Julian Wells. Their cold, calm presence sent a ripple of unease through the station. "Who the hell is Julian Wells?" Sullivan scoffed from the back. No one answered. Julian was unshackled, his folder returned. As he walked out, the officers at the desk finally understood. This wasn't just a DOJ official. This was the chair of the National Oversight Program on Police Misconduct, the man whose name was whispered in precincts like a ghost story. The moment Julian was clear, FBI agents moved in with a pre-approved warrant Julian had written himself months ago, contingent on real-time video confirmation of procedural violations. That moment had arrived. Teams began seizing computers and files, uncovering mismatched timestamps, unsigned complaint resolutions, and a trail of unexplained payments leading to a local politician. The signature on the approvals, Captain Derek Sullivan. Back in a secure room, an agent asked Julian for a statement. He declined. simply handing over the time-stamped footage from his pen. "This isn't retaliation," he said, his voice level. "This is sunlight. What started as one unlawful arrest exploded into a federal RISU investigation, targeting the organized crime of authority abused in plain sight. The investigation expanded to 14 other officers, 2 district attorneys, and a sitting state senator. And at the center of it all was the footage from Officer Riley. His body cam had captured background conversations, mentions of cleaning the books, ghost files, and a monthly envelope. Julian met Riley at a government safe house. The young officer expected to be fired. Instead, Julian handed him a file. "Federal witness protection. You're protecting me?" Riley asked, his voice trembling. "You protected the truth first," Julian replied, with tears in his eyes. Riley confessed that the pressure of hiding his identity as a gay man in a precinct where slurs were currency had pushed him to the brink of suicide. "But then I saw you," he whispered. "And you didn't even flinch." Julian said nothing, letting the shared understanding hang in the air. He had stood where Riley stood, not in uniform, but in fear. This was simply paying a debt forward. Weeks later, in a quiet courtroom, Derek Sullivan stood in shackles, his swagger replaced by a hollow shell. 17 convictions were handed down, with prison sentences ranging from 7 to 18 years. The civil suit that followed awarded over $40 million in restitution to the victims. But the true victory came months later. At a podium draped in the American flag, the President of the United States signed a new set of federal standards for police accountability into law. It was titled the Wells Act. Julian stood beside him, not for the cameras, but for the presence. As the president finished, Julian did not speak. He simply placed a single, small rainbow pin on the podium, turned and walked away. The boy who was thrown out for being weak now had his name etched into the very fabric of the nation's laws, because the most powerful weapon against injustice isn't a gavel or a gun. It's a quiet, unassuming architect they never saw coming, sitting in the shadows, writing the future they swore would never arrive. Do you believe the people who write the rules should also have lived through the pain those rules are meant to fix? Comment below with your thoughts. And if you believe in stories that speak truth to power, follow for more